We have an unidentified flying object.
Researcher on a mission with Dr. J.N. Elias.
We have an unidentified flying object.
Welcome back to another episode of Dr. J Radio Live. And as always, we have a fantastic show for you today. But today is extra fantastic because backed by popular demand is one of the greatest people that we have ever interviewed. And to me, the person who has done more so for disclosure and more so for humanity in terms of getting everyone to learn how to have peaceful contact with extraterrestrial themselves. And that person being Dr. Stephen Greer. Dr. Greer, welcome back to the show.
Great. I'm very happy to be back with you.
It's always a pleasure to have you back because every single time we have you, not only are people super excited, but we always get new up-to-date information from you. And I think this time is perfect because since the last time we had you on, John Podesta had that infamous tweet that his biggest regret from 2014 was, of course, not securing the alien or the UFO files, as he put them. And I know from your previous history of your over 2 decades involved in the disclosure movement, if not longer than that you've actually briefed Podesta and you've had some involvement with him personally. Can you talk about the tweet that he sent out as well as your relationship with him?
Well, some background. First of all, beginning in 2001, after the launch of the global disclosure movement, at the National Press Club in Washington, D.C. About a year later, in 2002, John Podesta, with some other people, came forward actually openly calling for the end of the UFO secrecy and the disclosure of the information. Now, people need to understand that Podesta was the chief of staff for many years for President Bill Clinton, whose first CIA director I had personally briefed. And so he knew of the secrecy, and he knew also that these projects were being illegally operated or in an extra-constitutional way being held back from a lot of the senior people in the government, including the president. So he was not new to the subject even in 2002. So it goes really back to the Clinton administration when, as you know, prior to the launching of the public global disclosure movement, I had been working with people at the Pentagon and the White House and Congress trying to get some public support for open disclosure. The president took a pass on it, and no one in Congress had the guts to hold a hearing, and so then we in 2001 did the National Press Club event and have continued to release information since then. So that's how he actually found out. It goes back way back into the 90s. And so fast forward to the current president of the United States is, of course, Barack Obama. He got elected in the November of 2008. And from November until January, when he took office, January of 2009, there's what's called the transition period, and that's when he puts together his cabinet. And John Podesta, again, was called in by President Obama, President-elect Obama, to put together the cabinet. So he was in charge of the transition committee and helped assemble the president's team, including his national security team, et cetera, between November and January of 2008, 2009. And shortly after that, some people reached out to me who worked with and knew Podesta to get a briefing put together for the new president. And I believe it was in 2010 that was then finally presented via contacts to John Podesta. And the man that I was working with was an attorney in D.C. who does not want to be publicly identified because of the sensitive work that he does. But he was really the go-between. And people have to understand that really John Podesta had been the sort of the guru on secrecy and national security issues for this new president, who, as you know, had never held a sensitive position in government. He'd been a senator from Illinois for a very short time, and prior to that was, a community organizer. So he really did not know his way around the national security state, and Podesta was really his go-to guy and has remained his go-to guy on those issues. And so Podesta did not want to take a position inside the administration. And so after he put the cabinet together and helped assemble the team for President Obama, he remained sort of in the private sector and at the Center for American Progress, which is a think tank that he founded, and doing some programs at Georgetown Law School, etc. But it was a couple years ago then he was called in to be the senior counsel to the president because there were so many things that were basically going sideways with the Obama presidency, and so he did finally take an official position as a senior counselor to the president or senior advisor to the president. And so it was during that period that he also was trying to work the issue, and when he left office, he tweeted out that he regretted that he wasn't able to effect that any disclosure on the matter. So because of that, if you go to our website, which is SiriusDisclosure.com, SIRIUS, like the star system, or Sirius Radio, SIRIUS Disclosure.com, all one word. If you go to SiriusDisclosure.com, you'll see an article I've written about all of this and the history of it and the significance of it. And part of the significance of it is that you have someone who has the pedigree and background that John Podesta has, and notwithstanding that, and his access to two presidents who have, in their collective period, will have had 4 terms as president of the United States, had not been able to get on the inside of these secret programs, and he regretted that, as anyone would. And a lot of people thought he was being cheeky when he sent that tweet, but he's not, because you can go back and look at the 2002 press briefing he did publicly coming out in favor of disclosure. So people need to understand he does take this issue very, very seriously. It was not a joke, and he does, has been interested since the 90s on this issue, when, of course, we were bringing this up into the attention of the Clinton presidency.
When you brought it up to the Clinton presidency, Hillary Clinton, there was a famous photo of her and Lawrence Rockefeller where she's holding a book on UFOs. You were intimately involved with the Rockefeller Initiative. Was Podesta involved at that same time?
I can't say if he was involved at that point. He may have been. That I honestly don't know. But let me correct something. It wasn't the Rockefeller Initiative. It was the Disclosure Project, which at that time was called the Project Starlight Initiative. And let me give a little bit of history of this, because this is something which Stephen Bassett and others have sort of named the Rockefeller Initiative. It was not the Rockefeller Initiative. What happened is that back in 1993, I believe it was, yes, 1993, which is, 22 years ago almost, 21 years ago, in the fall, I was invited with some other people to the Rockefeller Ranch. Now, Lawrence Rockefeller had reached out prior to that, and for all the conspiracy kooks out there, just to put something at rest, Lawrence Rockefeller wanted to have disclosure happen and wanted to have open, peaceful contact happen. He's people have said, oh, well, if you're dealing with him, you're part of some cabal. And that's because people are, frankly, very stupid. And I'll be just blunt about this. His brother, David Rockefeller, chased Manhattan Bank, and I think his nephew, Jay Rockefeller, who was head of the Senate Intelligence Committee, did not want Lawrence pushing on this. But Lawrence really did have a sincere interest that goes back all the way back. So I think people have to understand that Lawrence really did want to have disclosure happen. So he held an event at his ranch, the JY Ranch and the Grand Tetons, and I was present at that. And it was just really a get together, various people in the UFO community. And at that point, he didn't know anything about disclosure or an initiative with the White House. It was at that meeting that I think it was on one of the last days that we were doing a round table, and it came up that I was in the process of putting together a briefing for the president and was going to be briefing the CIA director, as well as going to Wright-Patterson Air Force Base to do a briefing for the division of the Air Force to which the original Roswell remains were sent. And you could have heard a pin drop. And at that point, and only at that point, did Lawrence Rockefeller take an interest, and I had put together something called the best available evidence of the best cases in the world up to that point, and documents. And he got involved and then hired someone to sort of rewrite it, and with some other people got involved in this whole effort. So it was, what it was is that Project Starlight, which then later hosted the first gathering of top-secret military and astronaut and cosmonauts at Asilomar near Monterey, California in 1995, I organized that, and it was a Project Starlight initiative to put all this evidence and testimony together and get that to the president. And if you go to our website, and if you read my first book, which is available on our website, SeriousDisclosure.com, you'll see the letter that me and Edgar Mitchell and cosmonaut Maureen Popovich and all these people signed at this meeting that Lawrence funded, but I organized under the Center for the Study of Extraterrestrial Intelligence and this Project Starlight initiative. Now, back in those days, we hoped that the president would go ahead and grow a pair, to be blunt, and head up this effort, and we would just put together the dispositive evidence and the information and sort of create, as it were, the guideposts through the government so that he would know where these operations are, which led to me putting together the facilities list, which I've also published on my website, of all the top-secret corporations' facilities and where they're located. People go to the website and just click around, they're going to be shocked, and I mean absolutely shocked at what's sitting in the public domain. Unfortunately, as you know, nobody reads anymore, but it is there for anyone who is able to read. So the bottom line here was that Lawrence Rockefeller kind of got involved with what we were already doing. And he said, he was very encouraging for the president to take an interest in that. And then, of course, he did host the president, Clinton, and the First Lady at the ranch for a couple of their vacations, where this issue and the evidence packets we put together had gone through very thoroughly. And he was, I think, the picture of Hillary holding Paul David's book about the UFOs was, taken by somebody. And that ended up being put out on the internet. But what I'm saying is that there's a big backstory to this. And one of the things that I'm going to do, I'm going to spend about 4 or 5 hours in Washington on March 29th. Anyone who wants to come, there's still a few seats available. And I'm going to do an entire kind of pulling the whole history back from the 90s up to the current hour of what's really going on with disclosure, what's been done, who's been briefed, how it happened, who knows, who doesn't know, what is the legal basis for disclosure, how have we done this without getting killed, frankly, and, what's the future of where we're going from here. But I just wanted to clarify, it's a very big mistake to call it the Rockefeller Initiative. It was Project Starlight, which is what we had founded. And Rockefeller, when I asked him to head up an initiative, said, no, I don't want to do that. He says, you need to be doing this, but I'm already getting so much flack from my family who are tied into the oil and banking interests who want to keep this stuff secret, that he said he could not take a leadership role in it. So somehow along the lines, when all this information came out that Lawrence Rockefeller had been involved, it got misnamed the Rockefeller Initiative, which, of course, you have parroted, and I'm just trying to correct that because it's not at all what it was.
And I'm actually absolutely glad you did, because as you just mentioned and alluded to, that I picked up that name from other sources, and that's what it's called all over. So setting the record straight.
You know what? Other sources are people with second, third, and fourth hand knowledge. So to be quite honest with you, I was the guy who initiated the whole thing and had a front row seat leading all the meetings and convening all the meetings with all these people going back to 1992 and 93. So I just wanted to clarify it, because Lawrence was actually very timid about this and was very reluctant to stick his neck out on it, because not because of any social opprobrium or condemnation. He wasn't a politician. He was a philanthropist. But he had a lot of problems. In fact, he took me, the famous story I tell in my autobiography, Hidden Truth, Forbidden Knowledge, where I'm taken out on Lawrence Rockefeller's deck there in the Grand Tetons at this gorgeous ranch, and it's late at night, and it's just him and me, and he looks at me, he says, we really need you to do this and all this. I said, well, Lawrence, I'm a very busy doctor. I got 4 children. I'm working full-time in emergency and trauma and whatnot, and he says, well, no, I can't do it. I said, what do you mean? I said, you're old, you're rich, and you're a Rockefeller. I started laughing, and he did too. And he was like 85 years old. And I said, we need you to head this up. He says, oh, no, it's too dangerous. And I already have members of my family jumping up and down on me, telling me to back off of this. So people have to understand, blood is thicker than water, and he did have some real resistance within the family members tied into the cabal who have been running and maintaining secrecy. Don't forget his brother Nelson Rockefeller, who had been vice president for a time, was the one who headed up the Rockefeller Commission of 1956 that reorganized the Department of Defense and the CIA, that made it so labyrinthine and difficult to penetrate that Eisenhower lost control of these secret projects. So, he knew that his family and brothers had been involved in a lot of this, but he, I think, was trying to karmically cleanse, if you will, that family legacy, and he was wanting to do it. So, but that's really the story. Well, in a nutshell, the story of that. And what for anyone who wants to hear, the real depths of this, is going to be a very interesting sort of expose on this. We're going to be hosting this afternoon-long workshop in Washington. They're not far from the White House on March 29th, and you can go to SeriousDisclosure.com and register for that if you'd like to attend.
Speaking of disclosure and politicians, we were talking off air about a politician who's actually going to be present at this event. Is it fair for us to talk about this person on air?
Sure. There's it's a former member of Congress who's very supportive of disclosure, who will be attending the event with another associate. And there are a number of people who will be coming who are tied in to various interests in Washington who attend. So that's not unusual when we hold an event like this. It's actually a very small event. It's limited to 50 people. So and then we're gonna have sort of a little reception afterwards, so I can talk with people, and so it'll be a nice afternoon event for folks who want to come to it.
One of the major things I love about your events is I don't think we're going to get disclosure via POTUS standing on front of the White House lawn and saying that, oh, we've been lying to you all these years and people have died, but by the way, we just thought you should know. But what you've created, CE5, Close Encounters of the Fifth Kind, human-initiated contact, I really think is the way to go. Rather than waiting for the politicians to do it for us, why not have each and every person on this earth make contact themselves, circumvent the government, and therefore we can speak for ourselves when dealing with these extraterrestrials. And you've set up the protocols to do exactly that. And I've seen people leaving your events after a CE5 event where their lives have transformed. And I think each and every time you do one of these events, you are setting the precedent that much higher, and more people go out and do it for themselves after that point. And that's why I think it's so important for people out there listening to attend these events. Now, let's talk more in detail on what exactly is going to happen on the DC event, and then again in April 18th in Los Angeles, that event, and how the two are different, or are they essentially the same event in two different cities?
No, it's totally different events. The one in Washington, D.C. really will be focused on disclosure and the evidence and who's in and who's out of the cabal and how it operates and what the structure of the secrecy is. It's going to be a very in-depth, if you will, expose, at least to the extent of my knowledge. What I'm doing in Glendale, in the Los Angeles area, on April 18th of this year, that's also open to the public. It's a much larger venue, so there's quite a few positions available if people want to come. That's going to be really focused on what you were just talking about, and that is human-initiated contact that basically goes outside the death grip of the national security state, where humans volunteer to become ambassadors to these civilizations and form contact teams and go out under the stars and use a set of protocols that really are amazingly effective. And so that whole afternoon workshop, and there'll be a reception afterwards where I'll do a book signing for anyone who happens to have my books and wants to sign, will be on April 18th in Glendale, California, which is sort of a Los Angeles area community. And that's really going to be focused on what are and I'm also going to be showing a lot of images of our expeditions, like the ET ambassador from the Andromeda Galaxy that we photographed up at Joshua Tree National Park a couple years ago, and a whole lot of other images that frankly people have never seen, that will explain how extraterrestrial intelligence, when they're coming into this dimension from other star systems, they drop out of linear 3D and go into other dimensions, and they can emerge back into 3D in all kinds of strange phenomena, whether it be electronic tones, almost holographic-looking light, completely solid objects, things that look like spherical objects that move through the group, ribbons of light that wrap around the group and go up through people's into their third eye. Literally, we have a photograph of this that you'll see that'll blow your mind. So I think what I really am going to concentrate on that entire day workshop, I think it's a whole afternoon, is how contact is made, what the protocols are. So I'll be teaching people these remote viewing protocols. And then what kind of phenomenon happens that isn't what you would expect. Because most people are expecting something like a 747, except it's shaped like a flying saucer. In reality, most of those objects that are seen are made by Lockheed Martin and Northrop Grumman, the big aerospace companies, and are man-made anti-gravity devices. The things that are actually extraterrestrial are very strange and very unusual, and appear in all kinds of different ways that are mind-blowing when you see them. And so, many times we have gotten these on camera. In fact, we have a video of one of them where we were having contact at Mount Shasta there in California, and it was almost like a light ship, it's hard to describe, that was in the forest with us, and it launched straight up and then takes a left turn towards the west. The camera person followed it with our night vision cameras, and it then begins to almost like stretch and go in and out of this dimension like an accordion, almost like it's so hard to describe. It blows your mind when you see it, and then just vanishes into space. And you can hear everyone in the contact circle just gasping. So people ask me, how many times does something like that happen? I said, well, several thousand times. Now, we can't always get it on camera. We don't have professional camera people, but we have a lot of images and video I'm going to show and I'll be able to narrate what the images are so people understand what's going on. And I think that when people begin to understand this and then understand what the protocols are that involve consciousness, electronic systems, lasers, there's a whole set of protocols we're using. And so that is going to be really the focus of that entire day at Glendale on April 18th. And so, anyone who's able to make it to that, you can get on SiriusDisclosure.com and register for that now. It's SIRIUS disclosure.com.
For both events, of course, for the Washington, D.C., March 29th, and, of course, the Glendale in Los Angeles County on April 18th. I have two comments that maybe we can merge together.
Yep.
The first is you're absolutely been a leader in ufology for over 2 decades, and you've always been ahead of the pack. And one of the examples I'm going to give is consciousness. A lot of these scientists try to separate ufology by looking at the science per se, but yet I don't think you can separate consciousness from this phenomenon because you're only going to have half the answer. And the second thing you mentioned, that a lot of people are looking for the equivalent of a flying saucer that's probably made by Lockheed Martin or Northrop Grumman or any of these defense contractors. And I was hoping we could talk about the difference between actual extraterrestrial craft versus the ARVs that the government has been perpetuating as extraterrestrial craft when really they're not.
Exactly, and I think it's a really important thing. It's not everything that glitters is gold, and you need to have some discernment and a knowledge base, and that's what's been withheld because everyone just calls everything a UFO. But actually, UFO means there are 2 categories once you eliminate things like Venus rising or misperceptions. One would be these man-made objects, and they behave in a very distinct way. They're very 3D, and if you see them up close, you're going to see they have parts. In other words, if they're going to have rivets, they're going to have sections, et cetera, and so on. The extraterrestrial vehicles do not. And one of the things I'm going to be talking about at this Glendale event is what is the extraterrestrial manufacturing technology, and how is that done through sort of a sonic effect that is interdimensional or transdimensional physics. What is the physics? And by the way, the big science of the next 1,000 years isn't anti-gravity and free energy. That was 20th century. The big sciences, big breakthroughs of the next 1,000 years are the science of consciousness, where thought and mind interface with electromagnetism, 3D, 4D, and how interstellar civilizations, which are really showing us the future by their very presence, are using that. Because if you're only locked into a 3D paradigm, 4D if you count time, you're going to miss 99% of the actual extraterrestrial phenomenon. Why? Because if they are interstellar, they have to go beyond the speed of light. If they go beyond the speed of light, they've dropped out of 3D and 4D by using very high voltage electromagnetic systems that allow the entire spacecraft and everyone on it to blip into another dimension, a higher frequency dimension, and then rematerialize, if you will, after they rematerialize into this dimension at this point in space and time at what we call Earth. We understand exactly how this is happening, by the way. And key to understanding that is this sort of larger cosmology, an understanding of the cosmos that goes beyond just 3 and 4D materialism and begins to incorporate this understanding of consciousness and fields of light consciousness and other subtle energies that used to be relegated to the realm of the mystic. But now we have mainstream scientists like Dr. Bob John at Princeton University. He's an engineer, and he was a doctorate in engineering. He's since passed away, but he and I spoke before he passed away, and he had the Princeton Engineering Anomalies Research Lab, where he proved that he could set up a random number generator, a sort of computer spitting out zeros and ones, and people could put their awareness on it, and under very controlled conditions, we could be able to shift the random number generator without touching it or being wired to it, just by thinking towards it. And so he did a number of experiments that have since been done by other scientists around the world and physicists that prove that consciousness is in an omnipresent field, a cosmic field, and thought operates out of consciousness. And thought can interface with electromagnetic devices, it can interface with material devices, et cetera, and so on. And then you begin to understand how remote healing happens, where people have had these miraculous healings from prayer and meditation. All of this begins to make sense once you open up that understanding of a conscious universe where the cosmos is actually awake. But there is solid scientific research to support this. So what I would say to people who say they're being scientific but ignoring the consciousness component is that they're pseudoscientists. It's like they're Flat Earth Society scientists that are locked into a paradigm that's linear when we're already dealing with a non-locality of physics. And this, of course, even Einstein observed what he called the spooky effect, where a particle could be at two places at once, which he couldn't understand because he didn't understand non-locality and trans-dimensional physics. But now we do. We do understand this. And what I'm saying to people is that these interstellar civilizations understand these hyperdimensional or transdimensional physics and the science of consciousness and thought and how it interfaces with devices and electromagnetism and contact events as easily as you and I talk on a cell phone. And that is what is really exciting. And to me, we're, instead of kind of perseverating on the material sciences trying to prove UFOs exist, which, that was really put the rest in the 1960s. We should be moving on 50 years later into this new frontier of where the science of consciousness interfaces with extraterrestrial contact. And that's really what I want to be focusing on in Glendale.
I'm really glad you mentioned that this will be the science for the next 1,000 years, because I really think that's the case. So many people are finally jumping on this bandwagon. And correct me if I'm wrong, but didn't Ben Rich say something along the lines of when someone asked him how these craft work, when he mentioned that we have things in the Nevada desert that would make George Lucas envious? Didn't he say something along the lines of, if you understand ESP, then you'll understand how they work?
Yes, he said that to an IBM executive who was there, who's a friend of mine, and to some other scientists, and he absolutely said that. So what I find really interesting is that the really high-end people in the aerospace industry or CIA or naval research labs or even academic centers understand this, but the UFO subculture, for the most part, is still ridiculing the whole idea of CE5. In fact, I got a tweet this week from somebody who said, well, if Dr. Greer thinks that consciousness and thought can interact with ETs, and he needs a doctor himself, implying that I was nuts. I didn't even reply to the tweet. By the way, my Twitter account is at Dr. Stephen Greer, Stephen with a V. And I just smiled and I went, yeah, well, listen, dude, got news for you. You're a dinosaur and, you belong to like the 1400s. But that's something you can't worry about, because if you're pioneering something like this, there are always going to be people who are lagging by a generation or two, and you expect that. But I think it's important that there be a pioneering effort by not just me, but by everyone listening on this interview, to become really informed of the science of consciousness and thought, and how that can interface with interstellar ET communication devices. And it's very specific. It is not just sort of a random y'all come sort of thing. So one of the things that we actually have an app also. If you go to SeriousDisclosure.com, there's an app that you can download on your smartphone that's an entire course in remote viewing the CE5 contact protocols, videos of how we've done it, how to form your own contact team. It's a very large file, but and it's there for anyone to learn who can't come to Glendale or to one of our week-long expeditions. And we put that out and made it developed it so that people could have a tutorial on their own. And there's also an entire contact training kit that you can get from our website if you can't come to the event in Glendale. But I think that what folks need to understand is how key thought and consciousness is to the interstellar paradigm. Because once you reach, let's say, escape velocity and go beyond the speed of light, I wrote a paper called The Crossing Point, and it refers to what is on the other side of the crossing point of light. And it's most of the cosmos. Most of what exists in the universe is beyond the speed of light, the speed of electrons, the frequency of matter, and 3D and 4D. And once you understand that, your whole worldview changes, because you go, oh my God, it's like we've been walking around 90% blind. And so opening literally your eyes to that and your inner eye to that, and learning how to go into deep meditation and remote view these extraterrestrial people and their civilizations and their spacecraft, and then learn to vector them or guide them into where you're located. And they may not appear like something in a Steven Spielberg movie, but they're going to appear if you're doing it for the right purpose. The right purpose being peaceful contact and interplanetary relations. Peaceful interplanetary relations. So that's really, and by the way, a lot of people laugh at this idea. They go, oh my God, that sounds so futuristic and out there. And I go, you know what? Nobody was laughing at the CIA and Army intelligence when we did this in 1992 on a beach in Florida, and 4 extraterrestrial spacecraft popped into view, and there were 2 colonels and Air Force guys there who saw it. This made its way back up through the chain of command, and the next thing you know, I'm being invited to a meeting with the head of Army intelligence, and a year later briefing the CIA director for the president. So they actually, at those levels of government, what we're doing is taken very seriously. It is the single biggest threat to their stranglehold on the secrecy, because if thousands and then millions of people start doing this, and they have results, and now with cameras to begin to document it, it's the end. So, and that's something anyone can do. People can do this and have 3 or 4 people in their backyard and do it. So, that's something that doesn't require an executive order by the President of the United States, which, frankly, I don't think is forthcoming, having dealt with many presidents now. I think that this, however, is something which, from a grassroots point of view, that's where the power is. The power resides with we, the people.
And this is exactly why I stand by what you're doing, and I stand by your events. I have personally witnessed not just what you've conducted, but how you've taught others. It's like that famous saying that Jesus had in the First Testament where someone was asking for food, but essentially he said something along the lines of, I will teach you how to fish. I know 2 people in the Southern California area using your protocols now go out weekly to different parks and teach others that they can have peaceful contact using the CE5 protocols. And as you mentioned, this is the true grassroots way of disclosure, because as you mentioned earlier, we will have millions upon millions of people doing this. And you really have started a revolution, and I think this is the right path to go. And even though there may be people there that are laughing, or like you mentioned, those dinosaurs, keep in mind, and everybody should recall this, as fast as we're writing history, it is being rewritten. The smartest people of our history's past have now been proven wrong. We have to accept new science as coming in and taking away the old. And if we don't, we're doing all an injustice to all of humanity.
Right, and of course, we don't have a minute to spare, because we're about 100 years off the timeline of what our natural evolution would have been, where we would have had peaceful, free energy and a peaceful world of abundance, which could have come about 100 years ago in the time of Nikola Tesla. By the way, Nikola Tesla was mentored on all these concepts by a fellow physician named Dr. Walter Russell, who wrote the Universal One, and whose Swananoa Institute is literally 10 minutes from my house here in Virginia, where my farm is. And I'm looking at it right now through my window. And what's interesting about that is that Nikola Tesla's most brilliant ideas came from the mentoring that Dr. Walter Russell had, and he had contact with ETs. So it's interesting, everyone knows Tesla Motors, knows the Tesla, energy. What they don't know is how he came over 100 years ago into the lot of the understanding of the cosmos that he did, and it was through consciousness.
Exactly. I've actually heard the same thing, that he was in tune with his consciousness. He had dreams that directed him to do stuff that other people weren't. And only now, 50, 70 years after his death, are we actually applying some of his principles, such as the alternating current, when at the time they pretty much put that to bed and put the DC, the direct current, in place, when it just ended up proving to be the wrong one to use, essentially. not as efficient as the AC. And so if only we were able to realize and accept everything that Tesla was giving the world at the time, I think you're absolutely right. We would be 100 years further down the evolutionary line than we are now. We've done ourselves.
This is what I call, the missing century. Everyone thinks we're so advanced when in reality we've been retarded by 100 years because of the evil kleptocracy of greed and stupidity that has sequestered this knowledge for over 100 years from the people. If the people had this, there would have been abundance. There would have been no need for World War I or II or the planned World War III that the idiots are planning. And frankly, this is another reason why there has to be a mass uprising that's peaceful, like the Civil Rights Movement, like so many other changes that have happened, where we reclaim our legacy, which has been stolen from us, not only in terms of these technologies, but in terms of us representing the earth to these civilizations that are waiting for us to grow up. And everyone says, well, why don't they? If they wanted to just let themselves be known, they could land at the Super Bowl. That's absolutely true. But if they did that, the covert programs would use that as the event to trigger the false flag alien invasion scenario, and then unite the whole world in an Independence Day, like the movie, a fear-mongering fest that would stampede the world into panic. So it has to be something that comes from inside humans. We, the children of Earth, have to grow up and take our rightful place in the cosmos. And I don't think this is going to happen from the top down or from the centers of power, because there has been no big change in human history that has come from the centers of power, whether it was in ancient Roman times or the early Christian era or the early technologies that came forward, or Galileo being excommunicated by the church because he dared to say that the earth went around the sun and not the other way around. It wasn't until the 90s that the Catholic Church finally unexcommunicated Galileo. That's a historical fact. So what we have to understand is that everyone's always looking around for someone else to do this. Here's what people have to understand. This is all on your shoulders, my shoulders, all of us. It isn't just on the shoulders of the president. This is not to exonerate that the president needs to do the right thing for the people, but it's rare that politicians and, frankly, lawyers do that. So what you find in Washington is self-interest, ambition, covering your ass, as they say, CYA. And I think this is why the courage and the leadership for this has to come from us. And also for disclosure. I mean, the whole disclosure project were dozens and now over 100 and some people who have come forward publicly who were in the military and in the CIA or in private corporations who disclose what they know. And, millions of people have seen that testimony that we have put up on our website. By the way, there's more than 6 of these top secret government witness testimonies up on SeriousDisclosure.com. Free for anyone to look at. So if you want to look at it, there it is. If you've got a computer or smartphone, it's there. So what I tell people is that we need to continue that also. It's not just the CE5 effort that needs to continue. It's also we need to have more and more of these whistleblowers and brave men and women come forward with information and documents. And that's part of what I'll be discussing in Washington, D.C. also, is what is the legal basis for them doing this, and how are they protected when they do, so they're not in the Edward Snowden category. And we have made sure of that. And I've been very, very careful about how we've set this up so that no one is prosecuted for coming forward with this information.
And I think you've done a fascinating job, especially leading up to the Disclosure Project, by filming all those whistleblowers who've had experiences while in their military career, and gave them the courage and the support to come forward. And the sad thing to me is right after you had the Disclosure Project at the press club, the National Press Club in Washington, D.C., we were plagued with the false flag of 9/11 right after. Do you think that had the timing of 9/11 had something to do with the timing of the Disclosure Project?
I try not to say things that I can't prove. I can just say that at the time that 9/11 happened, there were hundreds of thousands of people writing, faxing, and calling their members of Congress, and members of Congress getting very interested in leading up and doing some kind of constructive open disclosure event, and then bam, everyone's attention was placed on this other terrible thing that happened, 9/11. Very convenient.
Exactly.
Very strange timing. We're talking within 4 months. Is it causative? Is it related? I can't prove it. But of course, it was something that took the political establishment and the national security establishment attention off of what we had launched onto something that was viewed as an existential threat.
And that's exactly how I felt. Extremely convenient considering how much traction the Disclosure Project was gaining at the time this happened. And it sort of was eclipsed by what happened in New York and, of course, in D.C. and Pennsylvania. And it was really sad because I really thought the Disclosure Project, as impactful as it was, I really think could have had so much more attention had what happened in September of 2001 hadn't happened. But going back to something you said earlier, I think you're absolutely right that things don't happen from the top down. They happen from the bottom up. And going back to Martin Luther King with the Million Man March and the Civil Rights Movement, I think we need something like that. And by you going out and teaching everyone to have their own contact and then having them go teach others and essentially have this well-oiled machine where you have people from around the world being ambassadors themselves and teaching others to do the same thing and then providing the tools with everybody, I think in essence that could be the Million Man March of disclosure. Was that the idea you had in mind when you formed these protocols?
Yeah, it definitely is, because at this time you don't have to be gathered in one place, because with the internet, people can be doing it all over the world. And in fact, there's another app that's a free app that you can click on our website and get, if you scroll down on our front page, that allows you to see who are members of the CE5 teams in your area. And it's free. You can register, and then you can see who, and that way you can hook up with other people who are doing this and not have to be by yourself doing it. And right now, we launched that about a year ago, and there's just thousands of people all over the world in every country, virtually every country in the world, have now signed up and are part of that ET Content Network app. So there's two apps that we have. One is the one that trains you to do it. The other one is the one that allows you to connect with other people in your area. Or if you're traveling, you can zoom out and go to, Mozambique or even the Middle East and see who's there. And there are people in the Middle East that if you have a business trip and want to go out, you can meet with people all over the world. It's wonderful. And this has enabled people who are interested in going out under the stars and using these techniques and protocols to meet up with other people either in their area or if they're traveling somewhere.
One other thing that I've always wanted to talk to you about, but we've never had a chance, that I know you have in place because it's necessary, is the dead man's trigger. And I was wondering if we could talk about the concept and why it's important for someone who knows as much as you do, who is a threat to those in charge with the petrodollar empire, who want to essentially silence those who can have such an impact in changing the world.
Well, many years ago, I was told that you need to be very careful treading on this issue if you're doing anything substantive. If you're just kind of rehashing things that have been done since the 60s, which, frankly, that's what a lot of groups do, but if you're really leading the charge to change the status quo, it's a risky business. So I put in place a multi-centered holding of information, tapes, images, things I don't want to go into for obvious reasons, that if something were to happen to me would be massively released, which would be very damaging. The other thing that's in place is that there are people who are involved in these kind of projects who are on our side of this, who want to see the secrecy end. But they don't want to stick their necks out, because if they do, they'll end up like Bill Colby, the former CIA director who was helping me, who was found floating down the Potomac River the week that he was going to meet with my board to hand off a free energy device and $50 million in seed money so we could get it out to the public. That happened in the 90s. So we learned from these mistakes, and so we have things in place, but there are people who are on the inside of these covert programs who also have our back. So that's kind of its own dead man trigger, sort of a Mexican standoff, because up until that happened, I wasn't willing to put that kind of security in place. And I was asked if I wanted it, and I said, make it happen. So the dead man trigger is one concept, and then there's this other security system that's in place where I would be stomped on at some of these folks' great peril. And I say that with some authority, and I don't want to go into it more than that. But I'll just say that there are some very powerful people who have been historically involved in this cabal, who very much are on the side of wanting peaceful disclosure and to get off of this sort of death spiral that the planet is in, and this war footing that the military-industrial complex is in their attitude towards ETs. They know it's very dangerous, and they don't agree with it, but they don't want to stick their necks out too far openly, just like Lawrence Rockefeller didn't want to, for fear of reprisals from the powers that be, because this vicious group don't mind killing their own. All right, it's like the mafia, and so on that same token, at a certain point you have an umbrella of protection extended to you, where they also know that don't make a mistake like they did with Colby again, or with my assistant. There were a whole group of people who in the 90s dropped dead within a few months. And so that's when I took very seriously sort of decentralizing what I know, putting it in multiple places and offshore where it would be released massively if something happened to me. It's sort of an insurance policy, I hate to say it. And then we put this other system in place where there are people who basically have our backs, who want us to succeed, but don't want to be, if you will, the standard bearer or the publicly identified people. And those are folks who, not everyone who has gotten trapped into these secret programs are terrible. They're often very good people who get hoovered up, vacuumed up because of what they know, or they're scientifically very knowledgeable, but they don't agree with the agenda. But they're stuck. They're lifers, as they call them. And yet some of them have a lot of power. There's a very senior guy at the CIA who is very supportive of what we're doing and has been since the 90s. And he's a career person inside the system. And I know he's appalled at the sort of the consciousness of the really dark end of this majestic or magi crowd that are running these covert programs. So he very carefully is someone, along with a number of other people, who have shown support. And actually, when we were putting together the briefing for President Obama, was involved in some meetings and helping get some information together that went into that very large briefing for the president that went to John Podesta. So anyway, it's a crazy life, but it's never anything I thought I'd be doing. But we've taken these precautions because we have to. And after so many, my closest friend was killed, and Bill Colby was killed, and so many terrible things happened back in the mid to late 90s. I decided, I need to be very careful.
And we're glad you are, because obviously you are a threat to them. And by having your team members essentially killed off shows that you are getting to the territory that they don't want you to get into. Now, we have a little under 15 minutes left, so I have a few more questions, but by all means, if there's any areas that you want to go more into, feel free to take the conversation in that direction. Now, you mentioned that one of your team members was found in the Potomac River, if I'm not mistaken, the Potomac, you said. and when he was about to deliver a free energy device that could have essentially would have changed the world. And that got me to thinking about the STAR project, which you have going on. And we haven't talked about that for quite some time. I was wondering if you could tell the listeners about this amazing project you have that can change the world for us right now.
Right. Well, we have a challenge out. It's a $100,000 challenge for someone to develop one of these so-called over unity or free energy devices that meets very, very specific criteria, which are on the website. And the reason we did that is to see if there's anyone who can develop this without us, raising millions of dollars for a lab, which we haven't been able to do, where they would be willing to hand it off and allow us to reproduce it, disclose it, and get it out to the public as an open source device. Now, we're not even interested in something that has to be a black box secret or a patented system, because the patents will be seized. There are a whole lot of criteria. So far, no one's come forward with anything that actually meets the criteria, because it has to be a self-running machine. In other words, it has to be something that can run itself and run a load, a power load of at least a kilowatt. And so far, nobody has come forward with that. But periodically, people do stumble across the phenomenon of the zero-point field and are able to develop something. Usually, the national security state hoovers it up and sequesters it before we find out about it, or the person is bought off and becomes a centimillionaire and is told to shut up. But, we're hoping someone makes it through that system and actually can deliver something to us. So that challenge is out there. It was posted a while ago, and it's still waiting to be claimed.
And we hope somebody out there that is listening who actually has a lead on somebody who's working on such a device does come forward, because we've heard, as you mentioned, a lot of talk of people having these devices, but the fact that no one's come forward to claim that $100,000 prize yet is still speaking about having such a device makes me wonder, is it hogwash? I hate to say that, but
we spent almost $1 million. $900 and some $1,000 going all over the world, meeting with people who had fantastic claims, and they ended up having nothing. So what I'm saying is that talk is cheap. Prove it. It's like Oklahoma, the show me state. Show me. And the other thing is that there are people. Now, there are some things that we've seen that absolutely do work, but they want to keep it as a trade secret, kind of like Rossi is doing with his system in Italy. And that's just a non-starter, because you're going to take that to your grave just like Stan Meyer took his to his grave. And the people who ended up buying the Stan Meyer water fuel free energy car took it to Michigan, and it's vanished. And they outbid us because we didn't have enough money. We only had a few $100,000, and they had millions. And then last year, about this time, a man in England who was helping fund that called me desperately saying these people are having their lives threatened, and they're fleeing the country because they finally got this stuff to work. I said, yes, I knew that was going to happen, because they were doing it secretively. My view is that if you're going to work on something like this, you stream it, put it on the internet, and everyone sees it in real time. Don't keep it a secret. It's ridiculous, because you're going to end up dead. So now these people, last I heard, were on the lam running for their lives. And this was the entire Stan Meyer collection, including this donut-shaped toroidal machine that had a national security order on it that was a complete free energy machine. It wasn't a car running on water. And we saw it. We saw it in the warehouse of the heirs of Stan Meyer, and this group bought it out from under us. They've done everything wrong strategically, and now they're running for their lives.
I like what you said about being public. You cannot hide. It's going to get you killed. Yep. Use the internet. Use YouTube. Get your face out there. Get your idea out there before you can be silenced. Take what you just said, Dr. Greer, as a lesson, everybody out there listening. If you have something Don't be secret about it because they will find you. Dr. Greer, we have a little over 5 minutes left, and I wanted to spend this time talking more in detail of this event that's coming up in Washington, D.C. on March 29th. I know you said you're going to essentially talk about the disclosure, where we've been, what your efforts have been, the people you've briefed, and where we're going forward. And of course, it's going to be a totally different event than what we'll have a chance to speak about after you come back from DC before the Los Angeles event. But let's give people more of a preview and get them enticed on why it's so important to be at this DC event.
Well, people are going to hear information that I've never spoken of who has been briefed and what the story, the drama behind the 2001 launch of the Global Disclosure Movement, and also what's happened since then, what things have hijacked that effort, what we have to be careful of. And I wrote a paper that's called When Disclosure Serves Secrecy, and some of that has come to pass, where a lot of the disclosure movement effort has gotten tied to xenophobic, saber-rattling, evil aliens are coming to invade us, and has gotten commingled. And who's behind that and what's going on with that? And so it's going to be a very in-depth, nuanced look at not only what's happened, but what's happening now, and what we have to do in the future to secure a disclosure that actually benefits humanity instead of throwing humanity into World War III, an interplanetary war, which is what Douglas MacArthur called for in the 50s in his last address to Congress. He said World War III will be interplanetary. How do we avoid that? So I think it's going to be a very in-depth look at that. And then in Glendale, it's going to be a very deep look at the contact protocols. I'm going to be teaching people the meditation technique and the contact protocols and showing them the effect of them, all the images and all the different phenomena that can happen, whether it be tonal, sounds, lights, craft, beings that appear, how they appear, and so that people will leave. My goal is that people will leave that with an understanding so that they would be able to go out under the stars and begin to make contact.
And I've been privy to be at these events. Everybody out there listening, they are truly fantastic. You will leave a changed person for the better with the tools in your hands. Again, all the apps that Dr. Greer was speaking about, I personally have them on my phone. They are available for download in the App Store. And, of course, you can get all the information from SiriusDisclosure.com, CSIRIUS, disclosure.com. And I will put the website, of course, in the information box for this archived video, as well as you could also see the banner directly on our website, drjradiolive.com. And with that being said, Dr. Greer, as always, it has been a fantastic interview with you. And if you have one final statement before we let you go this evening, what would you have to say to everyone?
Well, I would just say to everyone that the disclosure and contact and the future of our planet is in our hands, and so we should be empowered to lead into the future and create the world of our dreams, because we're the ones responsible for it.
Well said. That is exactly what I say to everyone. Disclosure is in your hands. You have just as much responsibility as I do, so let's all use it. With that being said, everyone, stay tuned for Hour 2, and of course you'll be hearing more from Dr. Greer in 2 short weeks, right after the DC event and just before the Glendale event. As always, Dr. Stephen Greer gave a fascinating interview, and he will be joining us again after he returns from his DC event, which you'll all see, as you heard, from SiriusDisclosure.com, happening March 29th. He will be back on these airwaves Thursday, April 2nd, just before he has his April 18th event in Los Angeles, which, as you heard, will be a totally different than the Los Angeles or the DC event. 2 totally different events. Also, let's talk about some of the other guests that will be joining us right here on Researchers on a Mission or Dr. J Radio Live. Foster Gamble, the heir to the Procter & Gamble empire and maker of the film Thrive, will be joining us here live Tuesday, March 31st, and he will be taking your questions. Don't forget to join us that day. It'll be a fantastic interview. And then Thursday, April 9th, we have a 3-part special. Hour 1, we will have sixth man on the moon, Apollo 14 astronaut Dr. Edgar Mitchell. Following him will be a special short interview with Shannon Panzo, creator of ZoxPro, the system that teaches you how to bridge your conscious and your subconscious. Why did I pick him, you ask? Because it just so happens that I took that course, and Dr. Mitchell not only took that course, but is their spokesperson. So I saw it very fitting for him to come on right after Edgar Mitchell and right before former presidential candidate and governor of Massachusetts, Michael Dukakis, who lost to George Herbert Walker Bush in 1988. Just some other guests who will be joining us are, of course, we have Timothy Good, as well as Dan Willis, who happened to serve on the Disclosure Project's on the Disclosure Project witness list. He was there among so many other people, of course, Clifford Stone being another one, Captain Robert Salas, so many other people. But Dan Willis will be joining us in a special 2-hour interview with hour 1 with him, and of course the other hour with Timothy Good. Michael Cremo, forbidden archaeologist, which a question I'm dying to ask him, and I will, has to do with the gold mine that was found here in California that had bones in it, human bones that were dated to be about 5 million years old. And how could that be if we haven't existed so long? And that's just a handful of the people. Now, the next guest who's coming on right now, and after a few minutes after our break, is going to be Kartika Go, and she will be speaking on her new book, Multidimensional Traveler. And the reason why we chose to bring her on tonight is because she is very fitting for what she's going to be speaking about with consciousness, exactly what Dr. Greer picked up on, and so many researchers have picked up on it recently. Johnny, I know we've been speaking about this off air, on air with all these people. In your mind, why do you think consciousness is so important?
Well, if you listen to Dr. Greer just a moment ago, he talked about consciousness being part of the interaction between this dimension and other dimensions and obviously other beings. So if we can attune ourselves as a multidimensional being that we are into other frequencies, into other understandings, then that's the way that we're going to go forward. That's the way we're going to interact with their technology possibly. But, I think we have to be a bit careful when we put ourselves out, because if you're out there looking, someone can look back, and I'm a bit dubious of that. But that's my own insecurity, I suppose, of not having the big picture. But, I think consciousness, as I say, in the ufology field has to take a part, because people are becoming more conscious. It's spinning and spinning, and so I believe that it's going to be a big part of ufology in the next coming years, months even.
You brought up a really, really fantastic point, and we only have a brief couple minutes before we hit our break, and then we come back with our other guest. But I just want to bring this up to you real quick, Johnny. Stephen Hawking says we should be careful of going out there and searching for extraterrestrials, because what happens if we find them? Would this be a repeat of what happened when Columbus found the New World and slaughtered all the American Indians? Do you think by us looking and them looking back, we can be inviting trouble?
Well, the unknown is always sort of slightly fearful, because we have no understanding of it. But the more that we become aware, the more that we have understanding, the less and less fear comes into it, The British Army trained people to be fearless in regards to having understanding. So if you have a better information, more knowledge, better sort of, parameters around you to work with, then fear sort of disperses. And I think, most worry is the unknown. It's that there's something, the boogeyman's out there could get you. But I think if you have understanding and knowledge, then these things disperse very quickly.
Well, that's one thing we absolutely have to work forward at. As humanity as a whole. We have to look forward to abolishing fear because the powers that be use fear to control us. This is something that's been used for hundreds of years, if not thousands of years, by dictators, rulers, emperors, you name it. Fear has always been at the basis of control. But once we can actually get past that, and I think get in touch with our higher selves and open up our consciousness, I think the possibilities are endless. Now, what they are, only time remains to tell for us to actually see that, or as we have opportunities to open up our own consciousness, and of course talking to those who have already reached that level, such as the next guest that's coming on. With that being said, now is the time I want to give everyone our plugins. Of course, be sure and check out our website, drjradiolive.com, drjradiolive.com. All our interviews are uploaded there, and although we're a little slow to do it, we are getting them there in reverse order. So therefore, the newer interviews will be up sooner than the older interviews. But believe me, over the time, all 200 plus interviews will be uploaded on this new select channel, which is also under the name Dr. J Radio Live. That same name is all social media accounts from Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, Flickr, Tumblr, Google+, Gmail, the website, and of course YouTube, DRJ Radio Live. Again, at Dr. J Radio Live, or the name DRJ, Dr. J Radio Live, or drjradiolive.com. We do take guest requests. And of course, let's remind everybody about the contest, contactinthedesert.com. We are giving away tickets, 1 ticket a week beginning in mid-April. Go to contactinthedesert.com/DRJ, contactinthedesert.com/Dr. J. And of course, there will be 10 winners that will be announced right here on this radio show, live on Dark Matter Radio Network. With that being said, this is Dr. J with my co-host Johnny Webb. Everybody stay tuned. As we return from break, you will be hearing from the one and only Kartika Go, the multidimensional traveler. Welcome back to Hour 2 of Dr. J Radio Live. Of course, I am your host, Dr. J, and co-hosting with me live in London is Johnny Webb. And just before we introduce our Hour 2 guest, just some housekeeping matters. Of course, go to our website, drjradiolive.com, for all the updates of the upcoming shows, as well as the link to our YouTube channel for the archived shows. And also don't forget of our contest of Contact in the Desert, where we are giving away 1 ticket per week beginning in April for a total of 10 tickets. And you can enter at contactinthedesert.com/Dr. J, contactinthedesert.com/DRJ. Now, another one of our sponsors, ZoxPro.com, you should check out, because the person who we spoke to, and you will also hear again, is the same course that we took with Edgar Mitchell, is to learn to bridge your conscious with your subconscious, which actually relates to what Dr. Greer spoke, with what actually Dr. Edgar Mitchell spoke, as well as our guest today is going to speak about. And without further ado, let's go ahead and bring on the new guest. This is the author of The Multidimensional Traveler, and all you listeners out there might very well know her. And let's bring her on, Miss Kartika Go. Kartika, welcome to the show.
Hi, thank you so much for inviting me.
Oh, it is an absolute pleasure. You have written an outstanding book, and I think the time is ripe to get this knowledge out there, because I truly believe everybody has the capability of what you described in your book, that we all can transcend dimensions, time, space, remote view, and essentially change our future. So why don't you give the listeners a little background of yourself in the book before we jump into some questions?
Certainly. Well, the book itself is basically about how one can increase their vibrational frequency in order to transcend over time or even dimensions itself. How one can raise one's consciousness and elevate it in a sense. And as for myself, I was basically someone who was just catering into my academic life. I wasn't very much into this sort of topic. It seems that it's fate, really, that fate brought me to understand further of the true essence of this particular universe.
As I just mentioned, that I think we all have this capability. In your book, you actually are implying that each and every single one of us have the ability to travel through different dimensions, right?
Absolutely, Dr. J. In fact, I emphasize nearly in every single chapter that this ability is within everyone's reach. Everybody is able to do this.
Now, why has this knowledge been suppressed from the, I guess some people would call it the cabal, others would call it the secret government? There's so many other names you can call for the people that are the holders of this knowledge that are keeping it from the everyday man.
The true essence of humanity, or even of this particular universe itself, is that of the energetics. And when one raises one's consciousness and they're able to, using the power of their mind and even the power of their soul, to transcend over time and travel to various planets, dimensions, existences, what they're actually acquiring is more knowledge that will enable others to also sort of like be able to also transcend over this particular understanding of or our own concept of what exactly is the physical. Now, this really endangers what is currently going on. Like, who created this particular Earth itself is indeed debatable, but it seems that our true essence, that of the energetic, is being suppressed. And even when you look at the past civilizations themselves, for example, basically catastrophes happen. You don't know if they disappeared. All we are left with is basically artworks. And it is through these artworks and even particular symbols that archaeologists and certain individuals are starting to be able to unravel the mystery of the truth of the origin of our universe itself, or of Earth, or even our true essence, that of the energetics.
Now, this being a pro-New Age show, pro-UFO show, pro-paranormal show, the listeners out there, the majority of them absolutely believe in what we're speaking about. But of course, there are those skeptics, and to go one step further, the debunkers that say that this is all hogwash, there's no such thing. But obviously, we all have had instances where we know it's true. What do you say to those skeptics that basically throw this out in the garbage of what we know to be true?
I say that the evidence is pretty clear that no matter how hard we try to suppress, the individuals try to suppress these evidence, they're apparent in particular formations such as that of nature. For example, when you really, really tune in, when you're around nature and you really, really tune in to your true self, and you view it in its energetic forms. For example, the circles within a tree box. It's nature's way of trying to speak a language that gives us a clue that there are different dimensions, just like the particular symbols within the inner circle of tree bark. And these skeptics, even though they particularly question these, the question that I have to ask them is that, what about if they don't really believe in their true essence, that of the energetics, what about their attraction? They can't simply be attracted to an individual simply for the physical. Even though for the physical, like the individual is attractive, what actually is going on in their energetics is that their vibrational frequency is being raised when they're around the individual, such that they tend to find mates that would increase their own overall vibrational frequency.
Now, you mentioned tuning into oneself. Can you go into a little more detail of how you could do that?
You mean when you are in touch with the energetics?
Exactly.
How you could do that is you could imagine. I'm going to talk a little bit about consciousness actually right now. When we're awake, and you and I are speaking right now, our consciousness is within our physical brain itself. But when we're doing things that are very much in tune with that of the true essence of the universe, that of the energetics, what actually goes on is that these consciousness, some of them goes to the subconscious and some of them goes to the unconscious, and it creates a bridge. Now, when we are speaking, unfortunately, of what is termed as the unconscious, unfortunately, in our current terminology, that of the human terminology, these unconscious are energetic existences, energetic dimension. Now, when we are particularly near nature and our vibrational frequency is very much raised, what is actually going on is that we're creating this particular bridge itself in transferring our consciousness partly to our energetics. Is that a little bit too complicated?
No, absolutely not. And actually, this brings to my next question. We, by using words, we're essentially taking what our three-dimensional thoughts, our three-dimensional imagery and feelings, and trying to make them into linear thinking of two dimensions. And yet, I don't think that's the way we were created. We were created to be able to express ourselves through three dimensions. And I think the only way we can do that is by using our brain and merging the conscious with subconscious. Would you agree with that statement?
Absolutely, 100%.
Now, there are some people out there that, actually we've had callers about this, that are being harassed, is the term they use, by unseen forces or unknown forces. And then, of course, we have other people who just started having general turmoil in all their lives. What is your advice to any one of those listeners who are suffering from anything from the harassment to just the turmoil?
That everything within this universe happens for a reason. That every occurrence is very much fated. So if the universe wills it to be that for you or these individuals to experience it, perhaps it is time to tune in within yourself and try to seek the reason why you are actually experiencing these. That because perhaps your vibrational frequency is much higher than that of what is termed as the average majority. That's why you're experiencing these. Just to seek the truth continuously, as the truth is the only thing that will truly elevate your own knowledge.
Now, it seems that, first of all, a lot of people talk about us being in a crucial time and that we're at a tipping point, and that, of course, there was the 2012 scare a few years back, which was spanned decades. People were talking about that even in the 90s and prior to that. But there always seems to be some sort of tipping point that people say, as one of our previous guests stated, that it's like a boiling pot with the lid shaking. That's where we are at the state of humanity today. Does this mean, Well, with your specific take on the way you wrote your book and your take on humanity, does this mean that more people are prone to feeling more negative emotions and having negative thoughts because of what's going on on our planet?
Absolutely, absolutely. As you say it so beautifully, that we are really in a current, very, very critical time and a critical event in space. That how or to which particular energy we actually tune ourselves to, that of the positive or that to the negative, it really has come to a turning point, really. And when you find yourself continuously feeling this negativity, unfortunately, that is indeed the particular case for most people, that this is what they're facing. It is for them to truly understand that they are really, it's really their choice to tune in and to be one with the force of positivity or to succumb to the force of negativity.
How did you come across this information, which as some people would term as forbidden knowledge? Because obviously this is what is needed to take us to, some people would say, the next density. Other people would say to evolve us from the primitive beings that we are. And other people would even say this would just complete us, bring us full circle to what humankind has always and it has always been entitled to.
Well, it's through my journeys to the different dimensions, the different planets, that I came across this knowledge. Whenever I travel, I don't really focus on the aesthetic or really the surrounding, the environment. It's more of the knowledge that I take and the wisdom that I take back to my physical. That's what I focus on. And most certainly, in the last 2 chapters of my book, it's through my encounter with a particular force, in which I call the force of togetherness. We don't, for one, to think of this particular force as just simply as beings. That's incorrect, because we are all interconnected, and that's really what I mean by the force of togetherness. That our true essence is that of the energetics. Thus, individuals who vibrate in a very, very high positive vibrational frequency are conjoined and interconnected to one another, creating this particular force that is known as the force of togetherness.
Johnny's got a question. Go ahead, Johnny.
I was asking, how did you first get into this higher consciousness? You sound quite young, but you sound so sort of like you know exactly what's happening and how it's working for you. You know, I was asking you how you came about this. Was this something that came down through your family, or was this something that you picked up in travel, or?
Oh, not at all, not at all. My family, they're very conservative, actually. They're very much into mainstream science. So how I came across this particular experience, it's actually, funnily enough, Johnny, it was during one of my nights in London. I was visited by 3 tall light beings, and they told me that starting this, they gave me hints. They say that starting this point in your life, things are going to be changing. And it's true. I started traveling out of my physical body, whether unconsciously or mostly consciously, some 50-50, ever since that particular period itself.
Well, when you say that you were talking with these 3 beings, I think of like Mr. Janus, who was a sort of a visitor from another world who came to meet us in the 50s and spoke to our high-ranking military. But were these people human? Were they just higher conscious people, or were they different entities?
They were for sure what I call the higher dimensional beings. How I was aware that they were higher dimensional beings, in fact, I have a chapter on chapter 5 known as deception. It's how to differentiate a being from a higher being and a being that is of a lower dimension. And when you're really, really speaking with a very higher dimension, with a being that is from a much higher dimension, you actually feel it. You don't doubt. You have no doubt whatsoever, and you feel it within your heart through intuition, and you feel the love and the light and their connections to you. So these beings, just to answer your question as to basically what they look like, they're really, really tall 3 light beings, and they spoke to me telepathically, and that was actually what happened.
The beings that you mentioned, that of course the higher dimension beings, because they evolved to get to that higher dimension, they would obviously have ended such primitive habits that we have, such as tribal warfare and other things of hate, and would have evolved to states of love for all of all living creatures and in all spirits. Whereas the lower dimensional beings, some would essentially place them in the category of seeking out to do us harm. What would you say to that statement?
I completely agree. I completely agree that there are beings that are of a lower nature, and there are beings of a higher nature. It's forces of positivity and forces of negativity, and forces of light and forces of darkness.
What about the people who are actually in the know and are actually seeking this knowledge because they also have recognized their true potential? What can you share with them right now?
What I really want to share with them is for them to keep on going. No matter what obstacle is being faced in front of them, they have to keep on going, and they have to realize that this is indeed the time for them to choose to use their power and their ability within them to be connected to the forces of negativity or connected to the force of love and light. And such is not only in their further effort in wanting to be connected to these forces, but also it is reflected through their daily actions and the things that they speak to another individual. For example, is an individual more of a positive individual or a negative individual? You can totally see that from the words that they choose to speak about, or even the words that they use, because every single word has the power, whether they speak in a more positive tone, a more negative tone. So what I'm trying to say is just in simplicity for them to completely make a choice in which particular force they would like to align themselves to. And if it is indeed, of course, for the sake of this book and our conversation, the force of positivity, please reflect it on the actions and the things that they speak about and even their experiences itself.
Now, you talked about your first contact with these three higher dimensional beings, which essentially, to me, gives me the impression that you were one of the chosen ones, because in this day and age, there are so many people that have had such contact and were being told that they need to share this knowledge with others or have some sort of mission like that. Why do you think they chose you? Because do you think maybe that some past, even though you said your family is very conservative, do you think in your further family ancestry there may have been some contact, or do you think there was something that may have triggered your I don't want to say brain, because it's more than that. It's your soul, your consciousness, to activate your consciousness to be more active than others?
So I don't particularly like to use the word chosen, because I feel that everybody has this ability within them. I feel that the universe functions in a way that sometimes it relies on what I call the power of randomness. It's just the synchronicity of events that perhaps I was indeed at the right timing, or rather at the right state of mind, that particular incident happened, that it's more of the right synchronicity of timing. So I do believe that every individual could have this encounter if they start to elevate their own vibrational frequency.
Now, you did speak again about that one very life-changing event. That would be, to me, of course, meeting these three light beings of higher dimensions. Can you talk in detail about some other life-changing experiences you've had in your multidimensional travels?
Well, it's my encounter with the force of togetherness, in which I've never ever, in my multidimensional traveling, I've never ever traveled to such a higher dimension before, whereby I start to understand that, in fact, what the essence of this universe is truly composed of is this force of the togetherness, that we are all, since our true essence is that of the energetics, that we are all interconnected, that all of us, positive beings within this particular universe, make up even the current state of this particular universe itself, and every single thought that we have are interconnected to one another as well.
David Icke says that, we're like droplets of ocean in a water, as a sense of individually having our own conscious awareness and conscious sort of like understanding in a soul sense. But he also says that, as droplets that go back into the water or on the ocean, we become one again. Is it similar to these sort of conscious understandings that really we are all one consciousness experiencing from our own realities?
that that we are indeed interconnected, but that our consciousness is only connected to one another once we are, let's say, we're all vibrating in a very high positive vibrational frequency. Then the statement that you said is indeed true.
Today's people, media, these type of influences towards consciousness is more, in a sense, grounded, sort of down to earth thing, rather than what you're talking about, a higher consciousness, whereby in a higher conscious state, one is able to be like a Buddha in a sense and have a value of life and of the presence of energy, of light, and all of the things around us. But most people that are working and have to go to work in the morning and things, they don't really have that time. They think that's all pie in the sky. How can you, with what you've learned and understood, share that so that people that we call asleep or not conscious or in a high conscious state, how can you help those people with what you do? Could you give us a bit more detail on that?
Sure. Contrary to what individuals think, that in order to raise their consciousness, what they have to do is lock themselves up in a room and meditate quietly, they can actually do this anywhere they want, even when they're actually driving in their car. They can just say, envision a golden light going through between their eyes, going within their head area and down to their heart, or they can even do this subconsciously when they're walking their dog or going to the beach. These people, more often than what I call conscious meditation, it's more of a subconscious meditation that actually occurs to people of the current modern age, as you stated, Johnny.
God, I know that, as a kid, if you were daydreaming in school or whatever, you'd be, hey, Mr. Webb, wake up, come back to the reality. And what we're talking about here is the actual key to it, which is daydreaming. It's having that imagination to be able to create and manifest the image for it to manifest in reality, in a sense. And so, just like we say, imagine looking from your front door and you're about to knock on the door, how we can envision that very quickly. That's how I think, space-time is so fast. It's faster than light. It's faster than sound or whatever. The imagination can build a picture very, very quickly. And if we can imagine that being a dimensional thing.
I think you said it beautifully, Johnny. In fact, let's just speak about this very quickly, of a child that is daydreaming in class. What's actually occurring in the aspect of consciousness is, of course, the consciousness from the physical brain, again, is being transferred to the energetic body, thus creating that bridge again, or rather in the energetic existences, thus making the child much more sensitive, basically, to energetic existences, energetic beings. That's why, ever so often, young kids tend to have what they call imaginary friends, because they're what adults don't know is, of course, they could either be communicating with beings of a higher nature or even sometimes earthbound. It's all very much interrelated to the idea of consciousness, the idea that there are different dimensions, and also the transference of one's consciousness from one's physical brain to one's energetic body.
Going back to what you said earlier with the oneness and togetherness, this reminds me of a recent guest we had on, Betty Andreasen, with her husband, Bob Luca. She's been in contact with other dimensional beings for quite some time, and she essentially asked them about their religion, and she couldn't quite relay this information now. She's going to relay it in a future date. But she essentially said something along the lines of oneness, that they believe in oneness. And is that essentially what you were when you were talking about the togetherness? Is that the religion per se of the entire universe?
I'm very careful to use the word religion, since I think that's very much connected to the human perception. I believe that it's more of what we sense as nature is what probably a different word that connects to what you just said is, rather than religion, we use nature, that the nature of the universe is oneness or togetherness.
Going back to the experiences you were talking about earlier, can you talk about some of you talked about two of them. Of course, the first one where you had the three light beings that send you down this path, and then, of course, the one where you reached the highest dimension of them all, which showed you the nature of the universe, of the togetherness. Can you tell us about some other of your travels?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I've traveled to, which ones do you want exactly? Like the ones that we know, the planets that we know of in our physical dimension, such as Mars, Moon, and, the solar system of our particular Milky Way galaxy, or are you talking about more of an abstract?
Actually, I was hoping we can get a little bit of both.
Well, firstly, I could talk about my visit to a particular place called Center Moon. And what was intriguing, again, was indeed the knowledge that I actually was given about children with autism, as well as the elderly with Alzheimer's, that they suffered what is known as misalignment. That's why sometimes when you're speaking to them, they're there, and sometimes they're not. It's because of this particular misalignment of their consciousness. You see, I'm so sorry. I mean, because what I really, when I actually consciously travel to places, what I actually focus on mostly is the knowledge that I was given, rather than the surrounding aspects or the environment.
This is perfect. Everything that you're telling us is fascinating, and I know the listeners are probably feeling the exact same way, because this topic has come up upon a lot lately, and a lot of people are realizing that consciousness really is the key. So everything that you think may not make sense to us absolutely does. Can you tell us a little bit now about the travel, say per se, to the Mars or the Moon and other things in this solar system in our galaxy?
Yes, certainly. Mars, much like on Earth, there exist many different dimensions on Mars, actually even the physical dimension, just like Earth itself, whereby we have a few dimensions, and ours being the third dimension for our physical body, but for our energetic body it's the fourth dimension. And in Mars itself, there exist many different dimensions. Unfortunately, much like Earth itself, the forces of darkness itself has overtaken planet Mars. And though there are still some forces of light which are very much struggling to triumph over the forces of darkness, I'm sorry. If the readers or the listeners want me to go in detail, because I wrote all. It's more of a dialogue format, so it's all in a book itself.
No problem at all. Where would you say is the best place for people to stay tuned and connected to their soul?
I would say that they need to go to a place with a lot of water. People already unconsciously do this a lot. When they're feeling down, when they're feeling sad, they tend to find themselves going near the water, or even taking a shower, taking a bath, or sometimes even when they want to enhance their own vibrational frequency unconsciously to them. When they go with their lover, they tend to seek locations with a lot of water, the lakes, the oceans. Thus, this is actually indeed the right place for individuals to raise their own vibrational frequency, because what water actually does is that it really magnifies one's vibrational frequency and connect ones to the energetic existences. So contrary to what individuals have thought about on this planet, that they have to go to the church, the temple, whatsoever, it's more like going to any places with nature and the element of water.
Talking of the water element, I remember seeing the documentary of a Japanese man who'd frozen water, and he'd sent vibration of love and different sort of energies into the water, and so when they froze it, they were able to show the ice crystal and how it would change shape with different emotion and things like that. And they also took all the waters from different cities around the world and showed the water under its own sort of ice crystal, and how each city's water had a different shape and things. And this again, it's almost like a memory, or it's some sort of interaction in a sense. It's not like a chip, but it's the water memory and the ability to hold resonant energies. And in this case, it may even be conscious and vibrations, but rather than just water as we see it. But I find these things fascinating. And so, with consciousness, there are so many levels of vibration and understanding, and you can be conscious on a grounded level and be aware and open-minded and things like this. But then there's those sort of intuitions. Some people used to call them sixth sense. You have a sixth sense about someone. You feel the vibe of someone that you meet, and you think, I get a good vibe or a bad vibe, but I haven't spoken to the person, but I still feel something. So these resonant energies are certainly around us, and the thing is most of us, we don't learn about them in school. We're not taught about them. So when people do come into our understanding, and then we start to hear things like that, for me, I've always found it very fascinating. And again, I'd love to become a higher conscious person if it makes life for me and my family and my friends, a better existence. Certainly by being conscious and awake, we lose the ability of fear, because fear is unknown, where conscious means you have an understanding. How do you feel about these things I'm talking?
Yeah, I completely agree with you. In fact, I feel that the current understanding of what exactly consciousness is in psychology definition, or even in a mainstream science definition, is very much limited, just like what humans have been taught to believe that their mind is, that it is very much limited. It is very much connected only to the physical aspects of life itself. It's very much imprisoned, really, that this particular word itself, consciousness, in order for us to discover and to explore and to find out the truth about it, we need to further expand our understanding and therefore transcend over the current definition of consciousness.
Now, you travel all around the world, and I wanted to ask, subconscious or some communication you're receiving that tells you where to travel, or do you consciously make the decisions of where to go based on your previous experiences?
It's more of an either or, but when you're in the energetics, what you really think of is what you were really attracted to, or rather what you're vibrating in, the vibrational frequency that the level of the vibrational frequency that you're in, it will attract you to a particular place itself. Well, what I'm trying to say is that there are different dimensions that exist within this universe itself. And when your energetic vibration is elevated and you're vibrating much, much higher vibrational frequency, when you detach yourself from your physical body, you will find yourself able to go to a much higher dimension, or even a more variety of dimensions. But when you're feeling sad or you're feeling down, your vibrational frequency is vibrating in a much lower vibrational frequency, and unfortunately what that attracts you to is negative lower dimensional entities or even earthbounds. So, but in aspect to your question, as to whether we could go either or, we could ask where we want to go, or we just ask the universe to lead us. For example, I wish for the universe to lead me to a higher place whereby I could learn about, and then you'll feel yourself being pulled to that particular location itself.
I'm a bit sort of still out on the understandings of higher consciousness, in the sense of leaving our bodies. I remember my mum used to say to me, people that have out-of-body experiences, or OBEs, they have to be very careful because of a celestial cord, and if this cord breaks, you won't be able to get back into your body. And also, as a Christian, it's not a good thing to want to leave your soul, or your soul to be out of your vessel of your body. So what do you tell people that have, these OBEs, or to be able to come out in a conscious way? Do you believe that consciousness in a high conscious frame of mind, or a higher state of being, is part of a physical thing, like a soul being connected with a cord to the physical vessel?
Well, unlike the understanding, I see this silver cord as more of a symbol that the Tibetan Buddhists used to write about in their previous scriptures whatsoever, to try and relay to people of this particular invisible bridge that exists, that interconnects between the physical and the energetics. So it's more of whether we like it or not, unless our physical body is completely what we call dead, we will always have a part of our consciousness within our physical brain. Thus, even when we travel, there's always limitations. When you have any thoughts that are connected to your physical body itself, or any physical fear, anything that has a physical limit, you'll find yourself being pulled right back into your physical body.
When you talked about the three beings that essentially told you that you can transcend dimensions, what was your, I don't want to say the aha moment, but how did you actually achieve the multidimensional traveling?
In the beginning, apart from, of course, meeting these beings, it was very, very scary for me. I've never read any books or anything about multidimensional traveling. So it was very, very scary, and I would find myself, unfortunately, as most individuals are, our thoughts are very much connected to the lower aspects of the human life, which is, the drama in life, the personal. So when I detach from my physical body, I would find myself either stuck in an earthbound dimension or even in a much lower dimension. And that was very, very scary. You can imagine I was in one of my early years in college, and I was experiencing all these. So I didn't know what was happening, and along the way, I treat it more of like an education, that I start to get the knowledge, I start to understand that it is when you attune yourself to the forces of love and light that you will find yourself able to consciously go to much higher dimensional existences rather than being pulled to much lower dimensional existences. So I learned all these tips and tricks along the way. And that's why I wrote this book itself, so that individuals would be able to travel multidimensionally and not have to go through what I went through in the very beginning.
What is the key to achieving a successful multidimensional traveling?
It is a positive state of mind, an elevated vibrational frequency, and focus on the feelings of love and light. And people might say this over and over again, even in the Buddhist, Hindu scriptures, whatever, and it is indeed true that your mind is everything. What you think about, you attract. But every single thought has its own vibration, and that will attract a particular vibrational energy towards you. Thus, keeping your mind positive at all times is elevating your vibrational frequency, and that, with the feelings of love and light itself, will enable you to achieve successful, positive, multidimensional traveling.
Is there a difference between multidimensional traveling and, say, meditation? Say, like, when I say meditation, I mean in the form of, say, Buddha, that would, the typical images of him rising above the earth and floating on a cloud, in the sense of an OBE, an out-of-body experience, in a sort of a selfless place. Most people would call it their center of being, or things like this. Is there a difference between multidimensional travel and being under meditation?
Not at all, since it is one of the, it is both of the same thing.
You talked about the three beings that you essentially met initially. Have you encountered any other interdimensional or ultradimensional or extra-dimensional beings in your travels?
Do you mean during the beginning of my travel, or do you mean
all throughout?
All throughout. By that, do you mean ones that have different appearances than humans?
Exactly.
Yes, I've seen grotesque-looking ones, and but particularly the ones that the grotesque-looking ones are the ones that I speak of from the lower dimensional existences. However, when I went to Mars, as we spoke earlier, I met a being that existed in the physical, and it seems that the being itself has very much assimilated to the environment of Mars itself, and that it has a darker skin tone, like reddish tone itself, and what we would imagine a Martian would look like, with long ears. But as I said again, in Mars itself, there exists many different dimensions. Thus, there's a plethora of beings that exist there.
Johnny, go ahead. You got a question?
If we're trying to sort of wake the world up and, in a sense, get people on a highest consciousness, which means if we can collectively, have synchronicity amongst our consciousness, we can sort of take this leap of a higher understanding. Is it to accept an alien presence? Is it to accept ourselves to, you say transcend, excuse me. What's the matter with who we are at the moment, in a sense, Because from my Christian value is that God made us perfect who we are. Why do we need to transcend if we're already perfect in that sense?
If you're already perfect, is there a point in your life whereby you feel that something is really missing in your life, like that emptiness feeling within your heart?
For me, yes. Johnny?
For me, no, because I have the belief of the Lord, you know. It's a faith-based thing. It's something that I can't physically give you, but I know it's real, you know.
But isn't there always a point in an individual's life whereby they feel that empty feeling within their chest, even though they have, say, the perfect lover, the perfect meal, and the perfect family, that they still have that particular feeling as though they don't really belong here, like that sort of emptiness feeling?
That something is missing. Absolutely. I get that all the time.
Yes, Dr. J. That's because what we have been taught on what exactly our abilities are in this physical. We can work hard, gain a lot of money, and have successful careers, but still some of these people still have this sort of feeling. That's most certainly because they subconsciously are aware of their true energetic essence, that what they are, their true essence, is much more than what they have been taught to believe, that they are able to go beyond this physical limitation, so as to speak. The way I see it is that there's an invisible prison bars that's being placed around planet Earth itself. By that I mean it's our physicality. That when we learn to transcend and when we learn to raise our consciousness and elevate our consciousness, we're able to gain more knowledge. We're able to escape this our current dogmatic understanding of what exactly is our existence.
Kartika, it's been absolute fascinating, and of course there are so many more questions, and we definitely have to have you back. I want to give you first, before we get to the last question, a chance to tell everyone where they can find you, a website, and of course where they can find your books.
They can find books at Barnes & Noble or Amazon, and my website is www.thetogetherness.com. And thank you so much. Thank you so much for inviting me, you both. I really, really enjoyed it. Thank you so much.
It's an absolute pleasure. One final thing. If you have one final statement you want to give to all the listeners, what would it be?
That if they find themselves in a crossroad where they don't know which particular path they're supposed to go through, please just spend a quiet moment and look within them, because they will find the answers within them. And if they find that their mind is chattering too much, that it's much too difficult, seek within their heart, because they will always find it.
Everyone, you heard it from Kartika Go, author of The Multidimensional Traveler. I hope you've enjoyed it as much as we have. Be sure and join us again Tuesdays and Thursdays at drjradiolive.com. Of course, you can hear the live stream broadcast. And of course, we do take guest requests, and so much more is available on the site. And with that being said, this is Dr. J signing out.